hey, Matt from Stronger here, I want to go through a couple ways you can fix your squat, help relieve a little bit of back pain you might get. So a few main points you want to try to consider whenever you're looking at a squat is, first and foremost, just making sure you're keeping good abdominal pressure. So meaning that if you were to get poked in the middle of your squat, your front abs, your side abs, your lower abs, your back would all be equally firm and equally expanded. There'd be no collapse or vacuuming that happens in the squat. So making sure your core is set up properly in your squat is the most important thing. Next is we want to look at is just making sure that as you go through your squat, you're keeping good centration, meaning the bar stays over your midfoot, your feet stay flat, and then you're just working around those main points throughout the squat based on your body proportions and your mobility. So a couple things we want to look at is one just being, like I mentioned, your body proportions, and second will be your hip mobility and ankle mobility as you go through. So looking at hip proportions and limb lengths, you want to take a look at generally your femur and your torso length and how they compare to each other. So you can see Candace and I are basically, give or take, the same height. Our shoulders sit, roughly speaking, at the same height. But if we break it down into segments, my kneecap is about there and her kneecap is much lower, right? Our hip bones are about the same height at the greater trochanter, right? Meaning that here to here, her femur is longer than mine is by about 2 inches or so, but our torsos are about the same length. So relatively speaking, I have a shorter femur relative to my torso compared to Candace. So in my squat, if I were to go down, I have to go here, and my knees don't have to track this far forward in order for me to stay at a given torso length. Candace, on the other hand, if she were to go down, you'll see her knees are pretty much over her toes, about where I was, but she has to lean further forward in order to stay balanced in her squat, right? If she were to try to mimic the same torso angle as I had, for example, where, there, right? So try to get a little bit more upright. You see how she has to jam her knees further forward, and now her heels have to lift a little, or she's got to extend her back in order to stay upright. So none of them are really better or worse. You just have to respect your own body and pay attention to your own proportions. Trying to force my form on Candace or Candace's form on me isn't going to work. You're going to waste a lot of time trying to fix something that, unless you're cutting up your bones, it's not really going to get fixed. So, given your body proportions in mind, you want to take a look at your mobility as well. So we use a Rockback test for this. It's a pretty decent catch-all. We can take a look at your hip mobility, your knee mobility, and low-level spine stability as well. So I'm going to get Candace down here on her hands and knees. And the idea with this is we want her to start with a pretty neutral spine. So flatten out a little bit. So a little more. So about there, relatively speaking, the spine position you want to look for in a squat. This isn't an exact science here. So from here, I'm going to have Candace put her feet and knees into the position that she'd squat in, so probably a little bit wider, right? And then you're going to tuck your toes this way. Yeah. So basically, we've taken your squat and we've rotated it 90 degrees so that you can support yourself a little better. So from here, Candace, you're going to rock your hips back and just go as far as you can before you see the back start to tuck. So you can see Candace's hips can bend to about 120 degrees or so. And this isn't a problem for her. If somebody's super stiff, you'll see they'll start to round out right away and they can't keep their back flat. But for most people, this won't be too challenging. So from here, Candace, I'm gonna get you to put your elbows down on the ground and walk your elbows back a little bit. Yeah. So you can see here right away, because we've dropped the chest, her hips bend a little bit more. So you're gonna rock forward. Okay, again, find that flat back. And then you're gonna start rocking back. And you'll see about there is where Candace starts to tuck a little bit. So that's kind of the limit for her hip mobility. You can see hip mobility is not a big problem for her. So as someone with longer femurs, her hips and her knees aren't going to hold her back from squatting. We'd probably want to work more stability and control in the squat as opposed to loosening up her hips in theory. Okay. So both of those are really useful theory to know. Here, I'll let you come up. But we want to make sure that you can stabilize in those positions as well. So assuming you've got good mobility and you're using a form that works with your mobility and your limb lengths, we want to take a look at how well you can control those positions, meaning just your ability to resist external forces and then perform whatever task you're trying to do. So we're talking about squats today, so we'll go through a squat. So we'll use stick training as a way to go through this. The idea with it is this stick gives the other person that's bigger working with a lot of leverage over you to challenge your stability and your control through the movement. So what I'm gonna have Candace do is you're gonna hold this stick, you're gonna take your squat stance, and from here, it's gonna move towards me a little bit here. Okay. Candace is gonna go through a tempo squat, so about 5 seconds down, 5 seconds up, and I'm gonna work on trying to lightly push her around. I'll make it challenging for her to balance, but I'm gonna let her win. And you'll see that as she goes through the movement, she'll have to make some adjustments in her torso position, her knee position, her center mass, so where she's putting her weight in the squat. And this is a really good corrective because your strongest position is going to be your most stable position. So if you're doing something like squatting with really vertical shins when you have long femurs, for example, and you're stuck back on your toes doing this kind of a squat, right? I could give you a little tap and you're gonna go really. So we'll go ahead, you're gonna go for say 3 reps, 5 seconds down, 5 seconds up. And you can see as I start to push her back, she wants to lift her toes a little. So naturally, her knees track forward a little and she engages a bit more. And then we could go the other way just to make sure she's not leaning on me. And that's where the challenge comes in. I'm pushing with fingertips here. Most people, that's all you really need. Until somebody really dials it in, this is plenty, right? This is a really, really effective squat warm-up. Let's go for 1 more rep. And you can see it's just that little bit, and there you go. You're starting to really dial in where that weight distribution needs to be, right? So give these a try. One more thing you can add in is if you do have a rotational imbalance side to side. So let's say you squat like this, for example, where you kind of twist to the right. You could use the stick training and add a rotational component. So make sure you face the camera. So if you squat down, kind of twisting to the right? So if she's twisting to the right, we want to actually push her to the right so she's got to fight, right? So she'll have to create left rotation to balance it out. So if you come back up, keep the stick in line, right? Don't let me twist you and then go through your squat. You can see reflexively she has to correct to the left just by me pulling on this, right? And that's another way you can go through it. Effectively, you're just taking whatever position you're faulty in, adding a little bit of resistance the other way, and the stick challenges you to stabilize yourself in your squat. Hope that helps. Feel free to leave a comment on the video if you have any questions or comments about it, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks, bye.